So we were going to start in 2 Samuel, and I just really felt like I just was not satisfied with that we didn't get, my fault, but I didn't get a time for all of the part in 1 Samuel, the last part. And so what we basically end, and I just kind of ran through and just said a couple of things, but we basically had pretty much finished up with with your handout, your outline, chapter 24. That's there. It says David spares Saul's life 2 times. So in chapter 24, that was the first time that Saul had no clue David was right there. And it was interesting, the fact that, you know, his people, I would have thought the same thing. They said, hey, the Lord has brought him into your hand. He's brought him right here for you to kill Saul. And David refused to do it. So that was the first time in chapter 24. And then we talked about in 25. I just really want to reiterate that. It's kind of sad to me. Samuel did so much. And I mean, these 2 books are even written with his name on it. And there's just basically a one-liner of Samuel 25. It says, now Samuel died. He's dead. Okay, anyway. And all Israel did it, but it does say, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him. And they buried him at his home in Ramah. And again, it is so sweet to me that God allowed him to go back home after he had finished and completed what he was to do in the temple. He was able to go back home and be with his mom and dad. And so like I said, so that part, that's the one line, the one verse that talks about the death of Samuel. And I even looked, and there's nothing else about Samuel's death. So there you are. So anyway, we've got that with Samuel. And I don't remember if I mentioned this, but so I want to talk just a little bit about in chapter 25. And I talked kind of in detail about Nabal and Abigail and how this foolish man that David and his men, his 600 men, had been protecting them in the boundaries and protecting his sheep, and his men, his shepherds. And then when they needed some help and go to him, he sent 10 men, he was like, no, I'm not giving you anything. And this again shows us really the rage in David. David's not going to put up with anything, but yet he has tolerated Saul. And the reason why he tolerated Saul is because Saul was anointed and he was the king. And David honored that. And, you know, and sometimes, and we are all guilty of it. You know, the scripture, touch my anointed. And so many times we will be critical and we will say things, and sort of, Lord, help us with that. Holy Spirit, help us to pay respect, to give respect to those that are anointed and that are leaders over us. And then, of course, Abigail, she, and I love that name, and I know Abigail, I've always loved that name. So Abigail steps in, and the interesting thing is, and I think I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. If it had been me, I'd have said, look, he is an idiot, so spare us. We're so sorry. But instead, what she says, look, put all the blame on me. She lays prostrate and says, lay it on me. And because of that, I think is why David, one of many anyway, but David had mercy. And the cool thing is when Nabal dies, David, he marries her. And she becomes his second or third wife. Now, his first wife was Michal, and that was the daughter of Saul. And then the second one, I believe, was Abigail, and then the third one was a lady by the name of Ahinoam. whatever. And so that. Now the interesting thing is just by the by, Saul in his anger took her after they had been married, and he took her and had her married off to somebody else. So, yeah. So, so David had a total of 8 wives, and this is again on your outline. Michal, Abigail, Ahinoam, Maacah, Haggith, Abital, Eliha, and Bathsheba was the last, and then there was lots of concubines. So anyway, so we had that in the chapter 25. Then when we get to chapter 26, this is the second time that David has an opportunity to kill Saul, but he does not. And what had happened is they're pursuing him, and so Saul is there. They've made camp, and it gets back to David that they've made camp, and so they have Saul like in the inner circle, and there's warriors all around him, and his everybody close to him, and Saul is in the middle of that, and David gets one other to go with him. He asks one of 3, who will go with me? And one says, I'll go with you. And so they go and they tiptoe in, and they see Saul laying there. And again, the one with him says, look, this is your opportunity. God's given you an opportunity. He refuses to do it. But what he does do, and this is just kind of mischievous, he takes his sword and his water jug. That's mischievous to do that. And part of it was also to prove, I coulda, but I didn't. You think you're safe, but you're not. And so, again, and he does this confrontation. He stands up on a mountain and he wakes him up and he says, look, I could have done this. And that's where the verse 25 of chapter 26 says, then Saul said to David, may you be blessed, my son David. You will do great things and surely triumph. So David went on his way, and Saul went home. Now, what had been happening all this time, and we read, and I thought it was interesting because it always said, and David was in the desert, and David was in the desert. Well, he was in the desert in the area of Israel, or of Judah. But he finally thought to himself, and he said to himself in chapter 27, he says, okay, I'm really risking this. One day, he's going to come for me. So he has the idea, and I think it's very strategic and very smart. He decides to go into the territory of the Philistines because he knew Saul is not going to go in there after him. Saul had 3,000 chosen men. David only has 600 with him. And again, we know when we read, they're misfits. They're people that have debt to the government of Israel, and they're out. They're not your chosen. They're not who you would choose to fight. But they came to David. They saw David's plight. They saw what was going on with David, and they came to him and bonded with him and showed allegiance to him. And so anyway, David's idea is I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go into the Philistine area, and he finds favor with the king of Garth, his name is Achish. And he gives David and his men sanctuary, and they're allowed to stay there. And see, David had so much respect for David because by this point, David had a reputation following him of what he had been able to do. And so David says to him, look, I don't want to stay in the royal capital. Can I have a little area, a little village, one of your little villages? And so they give him the village of Ziklag. And so him, his 600 men, his 2 wives, all of their sheep, their cattle, everything, they go into this little town of Ziklag. And Achish thinks, boy, I have scored, because now I've got this mighty man and his 600 men, and their reputation has preceded them. They're going to fight my battles for me. And so for a year and 4 months, they did whatever Achish, whatever assignment he gave them, they did that. Now, and this is interesting, I'm noticing here several times, David lies. But he's doing it for protection, I mean, we know that he went into the town of Goliath, and walked in there, and I think what it was he was so burned out, he wasn't thinking. He walks in there carrying Goliath's sword. And they're like, isn't that? And so what does David do? He starts acting like he's loopy and drooling and acting wacky and saying wacky things. He's lying. He's saying, I'm not David, but it spared him. And here, Achish sends him on assignments to go to various places, and he goes. But Achish thinks he is attacking his own people, and he doesn't. He's attacking people around. But he is given the impression that he is attacking the Israelites. So Achish, his thought is well, they despise. He said, I've got David for the rest of his life. He's going to have loyalty to me because he is. There's disdain for him in the Hebrews' eyes now because of what he's doing. So he thinks he's got it together. And so this is what's going on in chapter 27. So I'm looking to make sure, I want to make sure I'm getting this. All right, so chapter 27, again, he goes in there, serves Achish, thought David would always be with him. I mentioned that. In the interesting, so, let's see now, what? So anyway, meanwhile, back on the farm, Saul is once again fighting them old Philistines. I tell you what, there's something else. I looked up to see to find out, were they ever totally annihilated? And they were not. What happened is when the Neo-Assyrians started coming in and attacking, it disbanded the Philistines, and they just went into other countries and stuff like that. So there's still, the bloodline is still around even to this day. And one of the thoughts is that's where the name Palestine is a word, the root word of it is Philistine. So, but anyway, so yeah. And so what happens, and I touched on this a little bit, on chapter 28, that is when Saul, who is so insecure and has been dependent on himself, never really trusted the Lord God. Well, as we identified earlier, Samuel has died, but Saul is in a big panic because the Philistine army is huge. Now, he has 3,000 men, but they can destroy him, and Saul doesn't know what to do. So he's desperate, and he goes and he finds out about a witch, and she lived in Endor, so the witch of Endor. Now, she was into necromancy. Do y'all know what that word means? Necromancy. Dead, the worship of dead, of the dead. When one would go to a fortune teller or a palm reader, that's necromancy, and they're going to call down or call up your loved one. And as I said last week, but folks, they are not strong enough to call someone back from the dead. They are not. It kind of disturbs me a little bit that it gives that illusion in the word. But I'm telling you, it was not Samuel. Samuel is in the bosom of Abraham, and he cannot be moved. The only one that was able to move was Jesus Christ with his resurrection, and he took them then to heaven when they left. But he goes to this woman. Now, he had outlawed all of this stuff, and so, but here's this woman, and so he comes and he's hooded, and he's disguised himself, and he says, I need to speak to the prophet Samuel. And again, he's desperate. He's got to hear. Now, he can't hear from God, whether he ever did or not. He can't hear from God, and he is beside himself. What am I going to do? So he goes to her, and she begins her chanting and everything, and the spirit of Samuel comes up. Folks, it's a familiar spirit. Do y'all know, have you ever heard the term familiar spirit? What a familiar spirit is, I had heard it explained this way. Remember in Psalms 23, says, there's the line, David says, surely goodness and mercy. That's like angels. And I'm sure at one point or another, y'all been in a service, and the preacher, whoever's speaking, will have two men come up, and they represent goodness and mercy, and they'll have them follow him all around like that. Remember when there was the rebellion in heaven, how many of the angels left? 1/3. That left 2/3. Okay, let's go back to elementary math. So 1 plus 2 is 3. So 3 over 3 is a whole, right? So there's 2 following us. Folks, I am under the persuasion that there's one evil that follows us around. And so they know us. They're familiar with us. And so that's what this thing was that came up. Of course, then she discovers it's Saul, and she freaks out. And I just want to say with this, we need to be careful that we do not bring pagan things into our homes. This thing, it's a real big thing now, where you go and get sage, and you get it smoking, and you walk through your house, supposedly purifying. Okay, it's a Native American, I don't know who all else, but I know it's a Native American thing. And there is a lot of Christian women and stuff that are doing it, and they have no idea. Folks, let me tell you, the smell of that sage is drawing spirits. It's drawing spirits to you. It's just like, I do pumpkins, okay? But my pumpkins are not cut. I do pumpkins in symbolizing of the harvest in that time of year, but I will not cut one, because a jack-o'-lantern is a calling card for evil spirits. And so, and we don't realize it. We don't understand it. Having a horseshoe in your house, that's like a lucky charm. A charm. Having that. Having a dream catcher. That's a big thing. But there's just several things. I'm even hesitant, and I may be going overboard, but I'm even hesitant to get a 5-pointed star. And I know the state of Texas has that star, and so that's a lot of this, when you go to Texas, or if anybody wants to do like a Western theme, they'll have a circle Texas. Y'all, that's a pentagram. So we need to be aware. We have gotten so naive that we don't realize some of the stuff we are doing. And then we wonder what's going on. We're wondering why our children are having nightmares at night. We're wondering why we're having nightmares at night. We're wondering what's going on. It's their calling cards. So Saul it's interesting that right after this now, because again now, the Philistine war is going on with them. It's right after that is when his 3 sons are killed, and then Saul is wounded with an arrow And he knows if those Philistines get a hold of him, they're not going to be kind to him. They're going to torture him. They're going to have their way with him. And he asks his armor bearer to kill him. And he says, I'm not going to kill you. So Saul commits suicide. He falls on his sword. And then his armor bearer falls on his sword. And so, again, so Saul is dead. Well, meanwhile, so we've got that going on with Saul. Meanwhile, before all of this battle occurred, the Philistines, again, David has been supporting the Philistines. He's been fighting for them. Well, now they're going to attack Saul, and it's probably like just this big grand finale, because they're thinking, okay, we've got it now. We've got even David on our side. So we're going to go in, and then they will be our slaves. So Achish lets David and his 600 men, we're traveling, we're going to go to fight this battle. And so they get there, and the other commanders of the various parts of the Philistine war army find out that David, the shepherd king, and his men are camped, and they're going to help. And they're like, what's he doing here? Mm-hmm. And the Achish says, oh, don't worry, he's loyal to us. And they're like, yeah, right. You know what's going to happen, don't you? We're going to get in there, and he's going to turn on us. They said, we don't want him in this battle. So Achish has to go back to David and say, sorry, son, because he was like a son to him. They had a camaraderie, a love. Sorry, son, you got to go back home. Well, here we go again. Do you realize how many times David was looking for someone to be a father figure to him? We talked about how that when Samuel came to the house and said, bring me all your sons, I don't think David was a second or thought at all. He just sent the 7. And so David has been rejected all of his life. Then the thing happened with Saul, and here he's been playing the harp for Saul, and then the Goliath thing, and that's when it says in the word, it says, Saul said, come live with me. Saul becomes his father-in-law. And what does Saul then try to do? Tries to kill him. So he's been rejected again. Then he goes over to Achish, and listen, let me tell you, he's been battling and fighting this for so long, he's worn out. He is down and depressed. And not only him, but his men are. It's just like, will this ever end? And I kind of, I know this, I kind of know that feeling when I've had a couple of situations where I've had a health issue or something, and you're just like, what next? And just you get exhausted. And one of them was, the most recent one was the issue with my kidneys. And it was like one thing after another. And I just, just exhausted. And you're like, well, what next? What is going to happen next? So anyway, I have an idea, and I know every one of y'all have been through something like this too. And if not, I'm sorry, but it'll happen. This will happen. So here he's got this Achish king, and they were tight, and he was looking to him as a father. And then the father rejects him and says, I don't want you fighting. So he has to go back. So here they had a long way to go. So they go back to Ziklag. Well, when the cat's away, the mice will play. And so them old Amalekites go in and they completely destroy Ziklag. Fortunately, they did not kill anybody. They took all the wives and all the children and all the cattle, and they took it to their camp. And but Ziklag, the buildings and everything was just dust. It was just done with. So these men get home, and so they've been rejected. They're hurt. Their feelings are hurt. They're humiliated. And they come over the horizon or come over the hill or whatever, and they see the smoke, the remains, and they don't see the family. they are so fit to be tied, as my mom would say, that they're ready to stone David. You know, you brought us out here. You know, it sounds like with Moses. You've brought us out here. And now look what has happened. David is depressed, folks. He is down. He is discouraged. And he goes to the Lord, and he's like, he doesn't, what he does, and this is what we have to remember. He begins to magnify the Lord. So many times what we do is when we have a problem, it's like we have a spiritual magnifying glass and we look at that problem and it looks bigger than it is. When what we should be doing, and I know it's hard to do this, but what we should be doing is magnifying the Lord. And he begins to encourage himself. And that's what we have to do sometimes. So my thought is get in front of the mirror and start speaking to yourself. You know, and I mean, sir?
But not for too long, because eventually you start seeing crazy stuff.
Oh, yeah, I know, because that is, I agree, but just, right, I agree. So here we go again, you know, here's some, but just, you know, I know I have done that sometimes. I've just looked at, and I said, you know what, you are a good person. And all of a sudden I feel like crying inside. And just talking to myself. But encourage ourselves. And he begins to encourage himself, and so there's several Psalms that you can refer to where he encouraged himself. One of them is Psalms 16. No, I'm sorry, Psalms 18. Well, 16 as well, but Psalms, first, number one is Psalms 18, and that correlates with, in 2 Samuel, the 22nd chapter, is all about, is a repeat. It's written a little differently, but it's basically the same. Sorry, I can't talk and turn pages at the same time. So it's connected with as I said, 2 Samuel chapter 22. Now this is long, but I just want to read down the first 3 verses. And this is in the NIV. He says, I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge. He is my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call to the Lord, who is worthy of praise, and I am saved from my enemies. Then when you look at chapter 16 of Psalms, this is another one that's connected with this. He's crying out because, again, he is an Israelite in the middle of Philistine territory, and he don't know what to do, and he's, you know, he's in a bad place. Psalm 16, NIV says, keep me safe, O God, for in you I take refuge. I said to the Lord, you are my Lord. Apart from you, I have no good thing. As for the saints who are in the land, they are the glorious ones in whom is all my delight. The sorrows of those will increase who run after other gods. Ooh, I'm going to read that again. The sorrows of those will increase who run after other gods. And if you notice that God is a little g. I will not pour out their libations of blood or take up their names on my lips. Lord, you have signed me my portion and my cup. You have made my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. And then the next one is, and I'm not going to read, because again, it's like 2 pages long. Psalms 56, and that's another one that it's emphasized that this was written around that time. He wrote this, was Psalms 56. So we've got 3 different Psalms that he is writing. So, and that's the thing is, and I've said this before, and I will repeat it. There is up in Ashland, Virginia, there is a camp that they started in the mid-50s, 1950s, and it was the name of the Heflins was the ministers who did this. And Mother Heflin, whenever she had a burden, whenever there was a crisis, whenever there was an issue, she would send the kids out, and she would shut the door, and she would pace that house worshiping the Lord. She wouldn't make a request. She just worshiped the Lord. And the problem would be resolved. And so, I'm not saying, and let me say this, I'm not putting and saying don't talk to the Lord. I'm not saying like tell him what the issue is. Because again, David says this. But the main thing is to worship him. And to remind him, to magnify him. Because I'm telling you, when you encourage a man and you talk about how wonderful he is, and you feel his muscle, oh wow, then if you notice when they do that, they'll tighten it even more, that muscle. Okay, and then they're like, oh honey, what can I do for you? Who do you need me to fight? When we magnify the Lord, he is, because this is just my opinion. When I look at the Godhead, I look and we call him our Father. So God is like the male version. To me, the Holy Spirit is a man, is a he, but he is more tender and compassionate. He is more sensitive, like a female. I am not saying he's a female. I'm not saying that. But, you've got all of these, so again, and so that's what David does. Well, he gets an understanding from the Lord, and he does what Saul should have done. If Saul had done what the Lord told him to do, the Amalekites there would have been no Amalekites to come in here and destroy. So what does David do? He cleans up the mess that Saul left. He goes in there and completely annihilates them. Then he gets all of the bounty and brings it back home. It's a sweet part it says, and David saw his wife. Isn't that sweet? He saw she was okay, but she was in that camp. And so, like I said, they went down and did that and brought it back to Ziklag. And then it talks about how David went from the bounty, that they gave gifts to every one of the kings in Judah to say thank you. Again, anyway, that was smart for him to do that. He's preparing, folks. He's getting himself ready because he's going to be the king. And so he's got to call on these people later. He needs to have a good rapport with them. And so, the plunder, that's the word I couldn't remember. I said bounty, but plunder. And so that is going on. And then while, again, Saul was talking to the witch, and then chapter 31, again, is about the death of Saul. But there is a couple of songs that I had thought of, and one of them, and it was real popular in the 1990s. To me, it's still a good song. I wish sometimes we sang it, but it says, I went to the enemy's camp, and I took back what he stole from me. I took back what he stole from me. I took back what he stole from me. I went to the enemy's camp, and I took back what he stole from me. He's under my feet. He's under my feet. He's under my feet. He's under my feet. Satan is under my feet. And then it would go into, look what the Lord has done. That's what David did. He went to the enemy camp and he took back.
Yeah.
And I can't think, Greg, what was that other one I was singing this afternoon?
Oh, shoot.
Hosanna.
Was that the old one?
Yeah, the old one, dear. Okay, never mind. All right, but there's another one, and it's just got a few words to it, but it's talking about the Lord. Just the worshiping, again, just worshiping the Lord. And so one reason why the thing with Ziklag, I wanted to really hone in on that is because so many of us have been at Ziklag. And it's like we've been hit and hit and hit, and we're tired. Even the fact, now this just come back to my memory. So here we go. So the men have walked or marched all the way back from wherever the Philistines were going to have the battle. Okay, they're exhausted. Well, now they find that. Well, now they're in a rage. And Billy can attest to this, because Cooper told me, when you're in boot camp, they're trying to get the rage up. Because if you're mad and you've got that drill sergeant in your face and you're not doing that gun like you're supposed to do, when you're not marching and snapping like that, when you get angry, you'll do that. Right, Billy? Uh-huh. Yeah, and so anyway, that rage, and so these people are, and so they went 3 days without eating, and so this 200 of them said, "Look, we're done. I'm sorry, we have no more energy. We cannot go and help. We're going to stay right here." So the other 400, they went on. The Lord gave them favor, and they were able to be nourished and fed by a little Egyptian that had been a slave of the Amalekites, and he had food and provided for them. And so they went on. When they came back, here again is the kindness, and this is a typical leader to me. When they came back to the 400 that came to the 200, the 400, and some of them had an attitude. And I'm going to tell you something. I think sometimes, again, it's a deception that we think everybody has to be in unity in a group to get something done. No. You need the core to be in agreement. But there's always going to be some that are like, I don't know. I don't know about this. And so that's what happened. There was some of them, their attitude was like, okay, look, we went. We fought. These other 200 didn't. So they should just get their wives and children, and they should not get any of the plunder or anything. And David said, no, we're going to bless them too. And that goes again in war, when there is a battle. Folks, you have to have some people in administrative positions and stuff like that are at home or in the headquarters that don't go out in the field. But if they were not there, it takes everyone. So everyone should get, okay? And so again, that just shows how the quality of David and what a great king he's going to be. And like I said, I wanted to emphasize that about Ziklag. Does anyone have any comments?
I was going to just ask you about that other song. Was it Send Judah First?
No.
Judah First in the battle shall be won? Send Judah First?
Yeah.
Remember that? The triumph? He sent Judah ahead to worship and praise the Lord before they went into battle. But I didn't know that was...
Yeah. I remember the chorus is Hosanna, blessed be the rock, or something like that, but I can't remember the first. I should have wrote it. Should have wrote it down. But it's
God of my salvation.
Look what, oh.
Blessed be the rock, God of my salvation.
salvation. What is it in the first part of it? Anyway, so yeah. One of the other little points, Ziklag, when the Philistines, when they defeated the Philistines with David, it says Ziklag is identified as royal property. It belonged to the kings of Judah, and it says as of this day. So here we go back to the fact about Samuel, the books of Samuel. When this initially was, when Samuel was written initially, it was not necessarily, Samuel contributed to it, but the totaling of this book of 1st and 2nd Samuel was, they believe it was totally written around the time when Judah and Israel had been divided into the southern nations, that was during the time that this was all put together. And that's why when you read in where it says about Ziklag, is that, and to this day it says, belongs to the kings of Judah. I just want to reiterate the fact that Samuel, the name Samuel, it means asked of God or heard by God, and he was from the tribe of Levi, and his location, where his family was again from the town of Ramah in Bethlehem. 1st and 2nd Samuel originally was one book. Now we've had several that we've discovered that was divided into 1st and 2nd or whatever books, but it initially was one book. But when the Septuagint was written, the Greek Septuagint was written, they divided it up into two books. So I think I've covered everything. And guess what, folks? I'm not going to keep you over. I've been 5 minutes after so yes. So anyway, we will start on 2nd Samuel, and y'all have that.
Yes.
So, and what I'm going to talk with 2nd Samuel, probably I'm just going to talk about the civil wars. 2nd Samuel, the civil war that occurred within Israel. So let's stand and go to the Lord in prayer for closing. Jack,